tapes or a tape that has been hidden for many years by the government, secret services, whoever, of Leon Brittan abusing young boys. So it isn't just Tony Blair's government, it's Margaret Thatcher's government. And Leon Brittan, I'll say it again, was a regular visitor to Elm Guest House at the same time as Gary Walker, who was heavily a leader of Sinn Féin and the IRA, while bombs were going off on the streets of this country. I'm sorry, I'm getting angry now. While bombs were going off on the streets in this country, and people were being accused of this and that, while these two, our Home Secretary and the leader of Sinn Féin and the IRA, were messing about with children at Elm Guest House and worse. And we're now going into the detail of snuff movies. A witness I'm working with was asked if he knew anything about a snuff movie where a young child was decapitated. So it's going a lot deeper, Lou, and I asked Nick Clegg that question 4 years ago, Lou.
Yeah. Bill, can we just quickly go on? What happened on the BBC this morning? Because obviously I came straight into the studio and I've just been...
Nick, 4 years ago, I asked you, what were you going to do about institutional paedophiles operating in this country now? Your reply to me, Nick, was, I don't know what you mean by institutional paedophile rings. Do you understand what I was talking about 4 years ago now, Nick, and stay in my eyes?
Well, they're naming Cyril Smith and they're saying the Liberal Democrat leader, the Liberal Democrat Party and the Labour Party have got questions to answer about paedophilia, institutional paedophilia within councils, within government.
Okay.
And he's banging on their door now, Lou.
So hang on a minute.
They can't hide anymore.
No, they can't hide.
Lou, can I just say that this is all because of victims that are coming forward. So you victims that are out there, you come forward because you're now witnesses. And, you know, this fight, we're taking this right into the heart. We are in the battlefield now, and swords and sabres are clashing.
Absolutely.
And we will not back down.
No, I mean, we
As
also...
victims and survivors of institutional child abuse, the people, when your audience, Lou, when they start watching the news today and they see what's happening, they will understand my temperament at the moment, if you like.
Absolutely.
And that's what I would like to say to all you institutional paedophile rings that are happening, that were involved in these atrocities that were happening. We said we're coming to get you, and it's not even started yet.
Now, the Labour MP for Rochdale, Simon Danchuk, recently published a book, Smile for the Camera, The Double Life of Cyril Smith. It detailed his investigation into allegations of child abuse surrounding his Liberal predecessor. Now he's been contacted by those involved in other investigations. And today he spoke to our reporter Becky Milligan about those investigations and the effect they've had on him.
It's harrowing listening to some of the stories, but I make this point, it's never as harrowing as what the victims have been through. We have regular conversations with people who've ended up on drugs. It's really ruined their lives. We hear about people who've committed suicide, and so when people say, oh, these victims are just coming forward to try and get some compensation, let me tell you, all the money in the world wouldn't, sorry.
That's all right, Simon. I know it's really harrowing. Are you okay?
The Rochdale MP, Simon Danchuk, talking to our reporter Becky Milligan earlier. To another the story, and the Jimmy Savile sex scandal at the BBC and with the police is rumbling on. 7 times, apparently, the police let Jimmy Savile off. That's the headlines of many of the newspapers today. But this was raised on Wednesday by Tom Watson in the House of Commons at Prime Minister's Questions. And if you listen carefully, you can hear a lot of the Conservative people at the very beginning, when Tom Watson stands up to speak, making sort of animal noises at him. But anyway, let's hear what he had to say.
Watson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The evidence file used to convict paedophile Peter Wrighton, if it still exists, contains clear intelligence of a widespread paedophile ring. One of its members boasts of his links to a senior aide of a former Prime Minister, who says he could smuggle indecent images of children from abroad. The leads were not followed up, but if the files still exist, I want to ensure that the Metropolitan Police secure the evidence, re-examine it, and investigate clear intelligence suggesting a powerful paedophile network linked to Parliament and Number 10.
But the most prominent paedophile associated with the Savile ring was a man called Edward Heath, who you may recall was Prime Minister and took us into the EEC. Heath was into little boys, and Savile was supplying them. A number of these boys were taken out of the Haute de Garenne home in Jersey. Savile was taking children from a children's home with the support of German assets in Jersey. What was happening was that children's homes in the Channel Islands, particularly Haute de Garenne in Jersey, children were being taken from these homes, boys, in the case of Edward Heath, as he was gay, and a paedophile, were being taken onto his yacht, the Morning Cloud. Savile was actually going out he went down to Jersey, and he was actually taking boys. There was another man involved as well, but Savile himself took boys from the children's home, where he was a guest, or welcome, onto the boat. So he was taking boys out onto Morning Cloud. Now, since Heath is well known, and since the boys were talking young men, the boys were murdered and thrown off the boat. That's why the BBC and the Cabinet Office have been so keen to protect Savile. That's why the Cabinet Office in the 1980s were willing to back Savile to the point of giving him a position of authority at Broadmoor, which is an absolute, you don't put a paedophile in charge of Broadmoor. The Cabinet Secretary at the time, who thankfully is no longer with us, Hunt, was also a paedophile, was in on this, met Savile. Now, he was Catholic, met Savile, as did that very nice man, the late Archbishop of Westminster, Cardinal Basil Hume. Basil was not a paedophile, but knew Hunt and had a shrewd idea. He wasn't stupid. He had a shrewd idea of what had been going on, and I've no doubt was told to keep a lid on it. Hunt was in on it, so the Cabinet Secretary at the time was in on it, was aware of what was going on, was aware he had a Prime Minister who was involved not just in abusing young boys, but was murdering them as well. It's quite possible that there was a crewman on the yacht who did the actual murder. I'm not saying Edward Heath necessarily bashed the boys on the Boko and tossed them overboard. He may have had somebody do that for him, but he was certainly guilty of murder under English law as an accessory or on the joint enterprise basis. Oh, if someone is inclined in that direction and you can supply them with boys, then you've got a hold on them, or girls. There's nothing worse for a politician than being exposed in the murder and sexual abuse of young people. And if you've got a politician who is abusing and killing young girls and boys, but boys or girls, then you've got a hold on them. Paedophilia is a wonderful means if you're a hostile intelligence agency of blackmailing politicians. The reason it's particularly disgusting, quite aside from the element of sexual abuse and coercion and corruption of young people, that's disgusting in and of itself. But what makes it particularly vile, and we saw this in the Madeleine McCann case, and that's why the Madeleine McCann case was so heartbreaking and tragic. If the children are, and I'm afraid with paedophilia we sometimes have babies being abused, but if you're not talking babies, if you're talking toddlers who are able to recognize the people who are abusing them, since the people There's absolutely no point doing it unless the politician is high profile. Since you're talking about people who are on television, people who are high profile, you have to murder the children in order to protect your asset. So for the Germans, it was essential that the boys that were being taken onto the yacht, that was a death ride. When Jimmy Savile was taking, let's say, a 14-year-old boy down to Morning Cloud, handing him over to Heath or a member of the crew on the yacht, it was a death ride. That was that boy's last journey on Earth.
Over recent days, the Daily Mail has splashed its front pages about the Labour deputy leader, her husband, Shadow Minister Jack Dromey, and the former Labour Health Secretary, Patricia Hewitt. All three worked for the National Council for Civil Liberties in the 1970s and 80s. The council, now known as the human rights organisation Liberty, was linked to the Paedophile Information Exchange, a group which campaigned for paedophiles' rights. It even argued to lower the age of consent to 10. Ms Harman became the legal officer at the NCCL in 1978, and her name appears on documents submitted to the Home Office that argued that pictures of naked children should not be banned as indecent unless it could be proved that the child had been harmed. All right, Harman, you were the legal officer for several years at the National Council for Civil Liberties, which was affiliated to the Paedophile Information Exchange. But why was it acceptable even to have an affiliation? They didn't try to hide what they were. The title of the group was the Paedophile Information Exchange. Why was it okay for them even to have any link with the group you worked for? At the time when you were the legal officer there, you wrote in a briefing paper to MPs, and we have it here, that prosecutions in relation to child protection and photography should only proceed if you can prove that children were actually harmed. Can you see why people might raise an eyebrow? Was the affiliation between the two groups a mistake?
Well, NCCL takes money from any organisation which was a lawful organisation and any individual.
You're happy that your employer for 4 years took membership money from a group that was overtly campaigning for the rights of paedophiles. That wasn't a mistake. That's what you're saying.
You know, I stand by what I was doing at NCCL, and I stand by what I've done all the way through.
I encountered Kenneth Clark MP, and when I did so, when I met him at Ian Greer's office, he molested me. He put his hand on my penis and kept it there. They hadn't spoken to Kenneth Clark MP, and they said they wouldn't be speaking to him because he was above the law. It was videotaped because it was the Cook Report. We videotaped everything. So we had a jacket camera and we had a suitcase camera. And when I was in the room, the suitcase camera I think went on the sofa opposite, and I had the jacket camera on. Now you can't see anything with the jacket camera because obviously someone comes in and touches you that way, but on the suitcase camera, you saw it. And when I got the tapes back to we were staying in a place called the Hyde Park Residence, they played the tapes, and the producers sat there and they watched it, and I watched it. So I know that they knew that I'd been molested by Kenneth Clark MP. John Major knew what we were doing, found out about it, and got Carlton Television, Carlton Communications, to buy Central Television to get hold of the Cook Report tapes, to get hold of the tape of Kenneth Clark molesting me in Ian Greer's office as well. So these tapes were taken by Carlton Communications. John Major said, well, the scandal was so huge it was going to bring down the Conservative government. Got Carlton Communications, who was a client of Ian Greer at the time, to do him a favour, which was to buy Central Television, which we were planning to do anyway, but much later. They were going to buy sort of all the little small independent television stations.
So you get that film footage?
To get that film footage. Now, the man who did the actual getting of the tapes was Prime Minister David Cameron. He worked for Carlton Communications. He was Michael Green, the CEO's right-hand man, and he handled it. So when the police went to David Cameron to say about questioning Kenneth Clark, guess what he said?